Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me? Sounds like you can. Wow, what a great morning to be here. This is, I think, the best venue for an event that I ever go to. This is perfect weather. I come from negative 10 degrees up in the Northeast right now. And great location. Open Minds has done a superb job. Thank you, Alejandro, for that great introduction. And I will just say that I prepared for a 90-minute lecture. Alejandro said backstage, "Oh no, 75 minutes, Richard." I thought, typical me, I have too much. But this will be great. I think we'll be able to go through this very nicely. The theme that I've been working on to present for you today, I never try to do the same presentation twice. I don't like to do that. I feel like it's wasting your time and mine. This is a field that just requires constant delving in. So what I find is that my lectures tend to evolve one after the next. This particular talk has been, I've been working it for the past, I think, 4-5 months or so, and there's some substantially new material here for you today. It's essentially a geopolitical analysis, to the extent that I'm able to do, of the UFO reality and cover-up. You know, when I started researching this years and years ago, I started with a very simple question, which was, is this part of our history for real? And of course, one answer leads you to dozens more questions. The answer to that, of course, is yes, it is part of our history. And then we ask, well, how? Why were they interested in UFOs? And how do they cover up with media control? And how do they cover up, manage the political institutions? And how do they control the academic and scientific institutions? And all of these are really involved questions that take a lot of time to kind of delve into. And then another question is, well, how is this managed internationally? Sure, the United States seems like they may be the top dog in this, but there are other countries, there's other power structures. How does this all happen? So I don't have every single answer to that. I don't know if any of us does, but I'm going hopefully a few yards further down the field today with you. So I've titled this talk, UFOs, the Real Power Struggle and the Endgame. I've got pictures there of some of the world leaders, and of course David Rockefeller, who, you know, I think he's, 168 years old now, surviving on the blood of 10-year-old boys yearly. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. And if he's not running it anymore, then his minions, obviously, the people around him, you know. So what's going on? I'm gonna blow through this first section quickly. This is kind of a rapid fire effect of my current assessment of the situation. All right? So I'm not really going to spend a lot of time analyzing specific documents to prove to you that, yes, the U.S. military is interested in UFOs. I've done this countless times. There's lots of books on it. My books, other books. Stanton Friedman is here. You can read his books. There is no question that there's a phenomenon that the militaries of the world, not just the American military, have been engaged in. A phenomenon that's not supposed to exist, but it does exist. With objects that don't look normal, disc-shaped, other shapes, but there they are, with behavioral characteristics that are off the charts. Zigzagging, even back in the 1940s, were observed by military personnel. Zigzagging, what can do that? Instant acceleration, silent, all of that. That's all on the record through countless, not countless, but many declassified U.S. military documents. So that proves, not that UFOs necessarily are alien, but it does prove that there's a very bizarre phenomenon that needs to be explaining. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that whole thing with you here. I'm going to give you my assessment, and then we're going to take it a few steps farther. So what's going on? First, we have retrievals of exotic, that is alien, technology and bodies, Roswell and elsewhere. Quite a few of those. So things came down, they were recovered, and clearly, if they're recovered, secrecy about this would be paramount because this is a big thing. You have to think really long and hard before you want to share this technology with the rest of the world, including your enemies like the Russians and any of these other people out there. So retrievals. But it's not just retrievals, because this phenomenon continued through the 40s, through the 50s and beyond, showing constant interest in sensitive installations, regular numbers of military engagements with his unknown craft. Here's just two of dozens of documents from during the Cold War era. We got these really when the Freedom of Information Act was at its most valuable, late 1970s, during the Carter years. The quote on the bottom there of that screen is from a FBI memo from early 1949. This is referring to an incredible wave of sightings over Los Alamos and over other sensitive installations. It says this matter, flying saucers, is considered top secret by intelligence officers of both the Army and the Air Forces. During the past 2 months, various sightings of unexplained phenomena have been reported in the vicinity of the Atomic Energy Commission installation at Los Alamos. They talk a lot more about many, many other aspects of what was going on there. And then there's another one from dealing with the Hanford nuclear plant in the state of Washington. Since July 30, 1950, objects round in form have been sighted over the Hanford plant. Air Force jets attempted interception with negative results. Can you just imagine if that information had come out at the time in 1950? Would that not be interesting? I think so. I think the public would have been interested, for sure. They were not aware of this until years later when this document was declassified. It goes on. All units, including the anti-aircraft battalion, radar units, Air Force fighter squadrons, and the FBI have been alerted for further observation. All very interesting. The Atomic Energy Commission states the investigation is continuing. Well, that's interesting, too, because we have no follow-up documentation through FOIA on this. Presumably, there was something that was generated in terms of reports and documentation. We don't have access to that. Anyway, this is a long-standing history going through the years, through the decades, generations, to this very day. It's not stopped, has not stopped. So, recovery of materials, classified engagements continuing through the years, which requires secrecy, obviously. You don't have to be a genius to understand this. You have to have how do you tell the world, if you're in the power structure, that this is going on? You don't really know how to tell the world about it. You don't really know, are these friend or foe? You can't control them. It's a nightmare. It's a political nightmare. So you have to keep it secret. You need to control all of the major organs that disseminate official truth in your society. That is the media, the press, academic institutions, science. Sometimes people think, well, that's not easy to do. I beg to differ. A lot easier than you think. You have your watchdogs in there, your guard dogs who are positioned in there. And we know much more about this today than we did years ago. We understand very well how the national security empire, the intelligence community, have their people in all of those institutions. Oh, yes, they do. And it's not that you can control every single person in there, but if you control the big shots, the power players, they can keep the little people in line. And that's, I think, exactly what happens. And we know through the CIA's project, Operation Mockingbird, for example, through the 40s and 50s and beyond, some of which was outed by Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame years ago. Hundreds of American journalists on the CIA payroll doing work, covert ops, reporting, and sometimes putting in false information into the media on behalf of the CIA, controlling editorial policy, and much more. Ask yourself what you could do if you personally controlled 400 American journalists without anyone knowing. Could you control the media completely? Well, maybe not completely, but you could have a lot of power. And that's exactly what was going on, and so much more. Same within academia. And then in the scientific community, of course, it all comes down to grant funding. If you have a classified subject such as UFOs, and if the technology is deeply classified, guess what? There's really not going to be a lot of grant money for scientific research in the public domain on those things, unless it's very, very quietly done. So it is not that difficult to control. And then the secrecy and the control creates a culture, which is kind of replicates itself. But it goes beyond that. So you've got the recovery, you've got the engagements, you've got the control over the institutions to keep the secrecy, and you create black budgets. Black budgets simply classified spending, military intelligence related, that Congress has little to no oversight over. We didn't even know that we had a black budget until around 1990-91. And officially now the black budget, I think in Wired or the New York Times, one of those said it's a little over $50 billion. But which actually makes me laugh. You know, the black budget back in 1990 was estimated at $30 billion, and we had a defense budget less than half of what it is now. I'll guarantee you it's more than 50. But the real black budget is not simply your classified tax dollars that you're paying for and that I'm paying for, but it's also illegal sources of money. Former HUD cabinet member Catherine Austin Fitts from the Bush Senior administration described the black budget very, very in much detail, arguing that it's not simply tax dollars, but drug trafficking money, banking fraud, and all kinds of illegal activities which permeate our global economy. All of that goes in to have an unaccounted for, unaccountable, free source of money, basically, that you don't have to explain away to the public, your own unvouchered monies. And that's, of course, important in order to do the classified research necessary on this most important of topics. And then you've got, well, as I was just saying, the illegal criminal financing of it. Whether we're talking about drug running through the CIA, the Cocaine Import Agency, I think it's called. They've called it that. Citibank, Chase Bank of New York. Again and again, we get news stories about HSBC as well, about money laundering going through those. This is endemic. And they, every now and then someone gets a slap on the wrist, and then they just keep going right on. So a lot of money there. So you get runaway secrecy. I call it privatization of the secret. I think this is something that now this is an idea that's taking root among other researchers. In other words, it's not simply the government. You have government, private, corporate kind of a nexus going on here. Where's the real center of power? If you are studying a piece of technology that comes from elsewhere, and you're the Army or you're the Air Force, eventually you're going to have to give it to Boeing or Raytheon or General Electric and other contractors who've got the real scientific infrastructure to look at this. And so it goes into those hands. So who owns it? Well, it becomes privatized more and more. It's a great advantage to privatize a secret. It makes it less amenable to public inquiry because it's now no longer classified, but proprietary. Big difference. And I think this is what's happened with a lot of the secret. We have a revolving door between the military and Wall Street, a revolving door between the military and private industry. And so it's really not hard to see how the secret can gravitate away from public, government agencies into the private hands where you can make a lot of money from it. Those programs go into dealing with secret technology. Whether, obviously it's secret technology. So if you're in a classified setting and you're studying propulsion systems of alien craft or electromagnetic properties of a particular piece of wreckage or what have you, presumably you'll come up with some very interesting ideas that some can make money for you, and others maybe are a little bit too important for mere money making because they're too revolutionary, but these are all secret technology programs. This is a very, very key part, and that I do think includes the creation of black triangles and more. Another important point, and this is really hammered home to me in a conversation with John Burroughs, who is here, John Burroughs of the Rendlesham Forest case, who's a very brilliant man, and I had a long, long conversation with him about the key of weaponizing. This is really important, I think, weaponizing the technologies that are recovered. Electromagnetic weapons, whether extra low frequency or high-powered microwaves, mind control weaponry. When you think about the UFO phenomenon, we understand that there's a key aspect of it in which people's mind, their consciousness is affected by what's going on. I'm sure many of you in the audience have had such an experience. Well, don't think that the military is not aware of this. And they are aware that any kind of mind-to-mind technology can be used as a weapon. So that's a big part of it. Propulsion technology, material science, all of these are key, and much more, into creating better and better weapons in a global competition. I think we can assume U.S. is way out ahead here, but there are several power blocks, I think, that are involved in this. Creates what I call a two-class system. Very simply, those who are in the know and the vast number of us who are really not in the know. Think about what kind of a world that is. You know, we've got this incredible revolutionary technology that falls into the lap of a very small group of military intelligence individuals, and they don't want to share, and they don't want to tell the rest of the world about it. So they just race on ahead, and that creates what I have called over the years a breakaway civilization. A lot of people talk about this now, and they have their own ideas. My idea is actually, I think, more modest than some of the other people who've taken this ball and run with it. That's fine. My idea of a breakaway civilization is very simple. It's simply that it's like the black budget world on steroids with ET technology tossed into the mix. So you've got breakthroughs that are made and which are classified. You know, some breakthroughs might have resulted in some high-tech innovations of today that are moneymakers. But if you have a breakthrough in energy, if you have a breakthrough in propulsion, in electrogravitics of some sort, or geomagnetic propulsion or lift, these would threaten to take down the oil industry, if nothing, or at least severely, affect it. And that's a little too revolutionary. And if we were to make such a breakthrough in our classified world, our bosses would probably be saying to us, good job, we're going to classify this. No one else is going to get access to it. Keep working on it. And so the patents become classified. And we continue on with our science, holding the rest of the world hostage, their future hostage, unable to make those breakthroughs. But we race ahead, and we race so far ahead that we may develop our own flying saucer technology. We may develop even technology that's beyond what we can imagine, allowing us, as insane as it might sound to some people, to leave the planet, to go elsewhere in the solar system, who knows where. That would constitute a separate civilization, in my view, one that's broken away from our own, hence the term. And I think that is part of the picture of what we're dealing with here. But it's more than that. I think this group, the way they see it, is they're in a desperate attempt to catch up to the others. That's what I sometimes call them. I don't know that they're extraterrestrial. I suspect they probably are, but maybe they're not. But they're others. They're not us. And the military community that's in this, thinking that way, would have to say to themselves, we must catch up. And this is a key point. I'm going to come back to it. Hiding their breakthroughs, I've kind of discussed this, hiding breakthroughs in energy, breakthroughs in propulsion, and much more. I received an email a little over a year ago from a gentleman. I think that this guy was the real deal, from the black budget world. He said, Mr. Dolan, liked your book, AD After Disclosure, but you didn't appreciate one important thing about our predicament, which is that I don't think you understand just how terrified we are of criminal proceedings in the event of disclosure. In fact, my co-author, Bryce Zabel, and I did write about that. It was a big interest of ours, but the impression I got from this man is he either didn't read that passage or that passage meant nothing to him because he was so terrified anyway. He said it's much worse. He said no one will ever cooperate in disclosure until they are absolutely sure that they will never be prosecuted, because this is a serious matter. And, when you think about it, what guarantee could there truly really be? What guarantee that would mean anything? You could say, oh yeah, we won't prosecute you if you come clean. But the public outcry would still be immense. The pitchforks and torches would be at the doorstep, and I don't think it would be a guarantee that people would be immune from prosecution, or worse. Be a lot of angry individuals out there. Some people would understand, others would not. So that's one thing. But I think the greater disclosure paralysis is simply when you step back and realize the global transformation that would happen with the outing of this secret. And this was the theme of our book, AD After Disclosure. At the end of that book, Bryce and I realized just why there was secrecy on UFOs, to be perfectly honest, because what we really understood just by trying to think it through, this it revolutionizes everything, not just the politics, not just world religions, not just the world of science, culture. And then the political blowback would be unbelievable. And then heads would certainly roll. you'd want to know, how did you keep this secret all these years? And that would open up the whole black budget aspect of this. So no, it's massive. And then the final aftermath of disclosure, how would nations presumably work together to deal with this challenge that's now out in the open of the presence of these others? These are difficult questions. So the easy thing for them to do is just to keep it contained as much as possible. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. That's all kind of an intro. And it looks like we're doing okay with time here. So one of the questions of disclosure, go back to the 1950s and 60s, if you know your history. Back in those days, there was a UFO organization in America called NICAP. I bet there's some NICAP members that are still here. And they were led by a retired Marine Corps major named Donald Kehoe. And back in those days, NICAP's stated goal was to achieve congressional hearings on UFOs. The idea was that the Air Force's policy of secrecy, and they always looked at the Air Force on this back then, that the Air Force's policy of secrecy on UFOs was misguided. They didn't trust the public not to panic, was the idea. But NICAP's position was, no, the public can handle it. We're Americans. Forget the rest of the world. They never entered into the thought process, I think. But the idea was, no, the public should know, and Congress is the appropriate tool of the American public for discussing this. Makes sense. And so NICAP, year after year, tried to get disclosure hearings, basically, on UFOs, and it didn't happen. A couple of times they got close and the rug got pulled out from underneath them. So the idea back then was that, well, we have a democratic system of government. We have a government that is responsive to the people. This is the proper way to deal with it, out in the open. But what if that's really not your system of government? It really wasn't the system even in the 50s when people thought it was. It's certainly not our system now. We have a Congress. We have a presidency. As I like to describe it, though, it's like finding a dead body on the road, and you see the dead body, and you look at it, and he doesn't move when you poke it with a stick. You think, well, I think he's dead. But then you realize, oh, no, he's still wearing the same clothes I saw him have on yesterday, so he's fine. That's our country. They have the same clothes. President, Congress, Supreme Court, institutions. Yeah, that should probably. But the body's dead. Or like in that movie Alien, where the thing comes out of the guy's chest like that. And what happened? The thing that's come out is a national security empire that's blown through the corpse of the republic. Sorry, but that's the case. So in other words, I'm mentioning this now because the nature of your political system, of our political system, is important when we talk about disclosure. Disclosure is a different thing if you've got a democratic versus let's say, a fascist type of a system. So let's ask, what is our political system? I don't really know if we have an exact answer to that, but we'll explore it. How much freedom do people actually have? Freedom isn't like an all or nothing thing, I've decided. I think, there's degrees of freedom. We have certain freedoms to do certain things. We have lack of freedom to do other things. And it's kind of like a spectrum. So I don't think it's wise for us to say we're either free or not free. We have freedoms, and it's just worth all of us asking, what is it actually that we do have? What is the true nature of our political system? And then as I continue, keep asking yourself, how could disclosure happen? Can it happen at all? So how does the cover-up work? Really simply, I would say a couple of key ways. International collaboration, which is dominated by the U.S. military, and the creation of a global system. So by that, think about how U.S. and Britain, U.S. and Canada, U.S. and New Zealand, U.S. and Australia, U.S. and the European nations, how they share intelligence. And we're seeing this is proceeding apace right now, even faster and faster as we move into the future. Many people have heard of, even from the 90s, a program known as Echelon. That's the program of the NSA and the equivalents in many other countries to gobble up electronic data from citizens and share it with each other. That's a real program. Very difficult to get good information on it, but it exists. And there's much more than Echelon at this point in the game. So within that system, though, what it appears is that the American component is first among equals. Makes sense. There's much more money in the American system. There's much more money and capability among the American technology. So they dominate. but to create a global system. So like, for example, I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but not too badly. Like if you're the leader of Brazil, all right, and you decide that disclosure would actually be a good thing. You know, we should tell the world about the UFO reality. Brazil has their own long history of encounters, of course, with this. They have knowledge, for sure. So why wouldn't the Brazilian president tell? This is my next slide. Yes, it is. Okay, so isn't that a great picture? Everyone's having fun. It's all a good party. Rock on, people. So why would the nations remain silent? Why would Brazil, or why would India, or why would China maybe remain silent? Well, China's a different story. But one is bribery. Countries, at least, that are under U.S. influence to some extent. I mean, this is happening in Ukraine right now. You know, the Ukrainian leadership guarantees being bribed, you know, to kingdom come just to give up their nation. Monsanto's in Ukraine, by the way. Isn't that nice? Some of the richest, blackest soil in the world that grows anything, Monsanto's in. This is how it all works. IMF comes in, they take over, and they gobble you up. So bribery, surveillance, blackmail, and threats. So again, like the president of Brazil, and this is actually true, cell phones were completely being tapped in by NSA. It was a big issue there. You know, we heard about Angela Merkel in Germany, same thing. So NSA basically, if you're a national leader, they know all your conversations. It's very difficult for you to make a plan about anything without the American system knowing about it. So if you were to disclose, you better be very quiet about it, very careful about how you go about your plan, all right? And then there's blackmail. I had a conversation with Catherine Austin Fitts. I've mentioned her once before in this talk. I do love Catherine. She's one of my heroes, great lady. She and I think William Binney of the NSA also said this, if I'm not mistaken. You get to a certain level in the political system, and you end up having a sit-down with whether it's FBI or CIA or NSA, and they let you know very clearly that they have the goods on you. Every little nasty website you've ever visited, or any little encounter that you've had that you shouldn't have had, or any other thing that you've done, they know, and they use it to control you. It's blackmail. J. Edgar Hoover, of course, was the master of this back in the old days. Well, I think this system has gotten much more pervasive since then. Blackmail and threats. I had a conversation years ago with astronaut Edgar Mitchell about this. This is a number of years ago, and you know, he doesn't talk about this much anymore, but for a number of years, Edgar Mitchell talked very explicitly about how there were two individuals that he'd communicated with from upper echelons of the national security apparatus who told him explicitly about alien technology and bodies that were recovered within the classified world. That's a pretty big statement for an Apollo 14 astronaut to make. You have to wonder, where's the media with that? Anyway, so I wrote to him, and I said, you know, you've made this statement. You told me about this personally on one occasion. I'm not expecting you to give up the names of these people, but can you throw me a bone here and give me something, a direction to move in? And he said, I would if I could, but I can't. And this is exactly what he said to me. The people who came to me when they did so under great threat to their, let me get this right, to their themselves professionally, personally, and to their families. To their families. I don't know how else to interpret that except through, well, something really bad happening. So, yes, I think that works very much on an international level. Fear even beyond the blackmail, beyond the threats. Fear of this phenomenon, I think. I'm going to come back to that. And powerlessness. I think this is why they remain silent. Because I think there's a recognition, once they're brought into some knowledge of this, that they're facing something that is vastly more powerful than anything they've encountered before. In AD, after disclosure, I recounted a story that was given to me by a very well-connected individual about Jimmy Carter's briefing on this matter in 1977. It was not known to this person what explicitly was said to the president, but at the end of the meeting, I'm told he was seen at his desk with his elbows on his desk, head in his hands, sobbing. Sense of powerlessness. How else is the silence kept? Well, I sort of talked about this a little bit before. Media control, the death of formal journalism. In a sense, There's really not the money in journalism that there once was, and there's certainly not as many good journalists out there as before. They don't have the leeway to do what they would like to do. The whole system has become consolidated. We all understand this. There is an alternative media, thank God, but the thing is, like, whereas the official kind of useless journalism does have access to the corridors of power, they just don't report the important things about it. Alternative media, which would love to report those things, does not, generally speaking, have much access to the, places of power. Not always. On occasion, we make little breakthroughs and leaks come out and stories come out. But what I think it's a remarkable phenomenon when you really think about how the mainstream media, which I don't think anyone in this room even pays attention to, maybe some of you, and yet it still has this power. But I have to think that it's like a house of cards. This is not a stable system of power. I can't believe it. At some point, we're going to have the moment in which some little person says the emperor is not wearing any clothes, and it may come down. I think so. Anyway, there's a little bit more going on here. I don't know how long I'm going to use this quote, but I like it. I'm going to use it for a little while, and it's appropriate for today. So the extraterrestrial question is the secret sauce that flavors the bad meal known as geopolitics. I like that. I think it's right, because what's going on in the world today, we have a lot of things happening. The UFO cover-up is an important thing, but it is not the only thing that's happening in the world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about two major current events. I'm going to talk about ISIS, and I'm going to talk about Russia. And you'll understand why, and I'm going to bring it back into this whole subject in a moment. The goals of our human handlers, the people at the top of the human pyramid, look at the UFO secret, but that's only one thing that they are concerned with. So there's, yes, access to secret technology, the presence of UFOs and, let's say, ETs. That's important. That's a huge existential issue right there. But they're also interested in owning all the stuff on the planet. They're interested they're competing with each other over that fact. They are essentially creating a new political paradigm. We sometimes call it the New World Order. We call it globalism. We call it a global community. Depends on who you are. They know that the bad stuff will hit the fan, probably. In other words, I mean, look at what's happening in Europe right now, with youth unemployment in some of the countries of almost 50%. We have economic problems here in this country that are becoming significant, long-term dismemberment of a productive manufacturing infrastructure, on and on and on. This is not going to go on indefinitely. Something bad's going to come out of this. So for them, that means a greater need to control the global population. It's necessary, all right? So one of the things that they're doing is they're ending nations. Nations that aren't really existing anymore. They're formalizing what I call a breakaway financial structure. You know, we saw it through NAFTA and GATT, and now the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, and many more of these. What we're seeing, in other words, is the creation of transnational legal structures, all right, that supersede national sovereignty. So Congress becomes irrelevant in the face of international trade agreements and things like this. These are corporate-friendly legal structures. The end of nations as we know it. National names will exist, so they'll be still wearing the same clothes, but they're going to be dead too. The structures are going to be dead. What we're going to have is a new system of royalty. New lords and ladies of the planet. They're already out there, basically running things. I mean, what is it? The top 85 wealthiest individuals in the world own as much wealth as the bottom half of humanity. The top 85 wealthiest people in the world own as much as the entire bottom half of the human race. All right? We talk about the top 1% with Occupy. They're really kind of missing it. It's the top 1% of the top 1% of the top 1%. That's where the power is. Someone has $10 million. I don't really care, honestly. What do I care? They have a nicer car, a nicer house than I do. Good for them. They don't really have the power to game the political system. Let them have their money. Someone's got $100 billion. That's a totally different thing right there. That's really what we need to be looking at, in my opinion. I don't really care about taxing someone with $10 million. I do care about preventing someone to have $100 billion and owning the political system in the US and around the world. That's just me. So now this system that's coming into place is not a done deal. There are other factors. Basically, you've got the Russian and Chinese bloc, and so it's resulted in what I call an undeclared war, especially with Russia. Remember the movie Highlander? There can only be one. Back from the 1980s, they had that cool 80s music and the white sneakers and swords. And you had these immortal people, and they could only die by having their heads cut off by one of their rivals, and then they would lose their power to that person. They'd become stronger, and there could only be one at the end. That's actually what we're in right now. We're in a system where the blocks are becoming smaller, and for the first time in human history, you have the potential for a tiny group of people to own everything, all the water, all the genetically modified food that they serve you, and the minerals in the ground and the air that you breathe, probably. So this has never happened before in human history, where all of this can be controlled under such a small group. And so that's what we're actually seeing. That's the fight. That and the petrodollar, which I'm going to get to just in a moment. So ISIS. Let me just, this is my take on the ISIS war. And I know we're in a UFO conference here, but again, I'm suggesting that this is significant in the broader context. Because what we are living in right now is in an era of proxy wars. And I'm not the only person saying this. This is becoming, I think, more and more widely understood. In other words, wars are not declared openly anymore. Not really, not if you can avoid it. It's much better to do this through veils, many, many veils. And what anyone who has researched this knows that the group that we now call ISIS was funded and organized and supported by a number of nations starting in 2011. US, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Israel, all of them in one way or another have supported that organization for their own reasons, primarily against Syria, which of course, as everyone here knows, has been demonized in the media. I marvel at this. There's a dictator. Everyone there is a dictator. A woman in Syria, in Damascus, would have an easier time walking down the streets than probably any other, or just about any other Arab nation. You could wear whatever you want to wear. They're westernized. They're not out to create Sharia law. So I don't know. From my point of view, it's not as extreme as some of the other places, but yet there's been a war against them for a long time. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them that has not gotten a lot of press is the so-called Islamic pipeline. This all has to do with, it comes down to Russia. Right now, Russia supplies Europe with oil and gas. We all know that. So there are different plans to go around that and subvert that dominance that Russia has. There's one plan for a pipeline to go, I think, from Turkmenistan through Turkey that would feed Europe. That's a good pipeline. But there's a better one. It's called the Islamic pipeline. Apparently it's better. Going from Iran through Iraq through Syria. Competition. We're talking trillions of dollars at stake here. So that's one reason that that pipeline must not go through, at least in the opinion of Western policymakers. Syria must be destabilized, taken out. And, all the other nations have their own reasons for wanting to do this. And Iran is part of the target as well, and Russia is part of the target. But it's all about that. And by the way, the reason you're driving such cheap gas right now, I'm sure you realize, is a meeting that John Kerry had last September with Saudi Arabia, in which they agreed to cut the price of oil by Saudi Arabia, vastly increasing their production. Why? Well, ultimately, it seems to take out the ruble. You cut the price of oil, there goes profits, also to hurt Iran. Hurts a lot of the other OPEC nations, but they got to take one for the team. And actually, here's the other thing, by the way. It's really hurting the U.S. more than any of these other nations, it looks like. I'm no fan of fracking. Maybe you are. Good for you. I'm not. But this is, and all the analysts are agreeing on this, is severely hurting the American fracking industry to the extent that it might actually cause a lot of those companies to go bankrupt. There you go, right? So, but the thing about it is that on an economic level, this is how perverse our society has become. That has been a key driver of economic growth in the United States, and that's the truth. So on that level, this whole policy could really well backfire against the U.S. I'm going to get more into this. So, oh, by the way, there's a picture of John McCain, your senator, who was meeting with some people who were determined to be high-level ISIS. Gee, that's my mistake, I guess John McCain said. The man who has never found a nation that doesn't want to bomb. I don't get it. Don't get it. What is this with this guy? I'm serious. So then, and the reason I just want to mention ISIS here is because when you look at the media coverage, obviously, the media portrayal of this is a totally different thing. Oh, we're at war with ISIS. We're going to take them out. I don't see this. The nations that are fighting ISIS are not U.S., not the U.S. The support that was given to ISIS, that's U.S., that's Turkey. You know, ISIS fighters went through that porous Turkey border into Syria for years. Turkey's a NATO nation. No one says boo. You know, this is all very known and never discussed in our corporate-dominated media. And then the not-so-secret war against Russia. This is what it's all about. It's very simple. I'm going to lay it out for you. U.S. is drowning in debt. We're having serious economic problems. We are looking at the potential end of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. All right? Many years ago, America made a deal with Saudi Arabia that they would sell their oil in dollars. It's the petrodollar. Nations buy their oil in dollars. This is why we went to war with Saddam Hussein years ago. It was one of the reasons, because he was threatening to use the euro as his currency exchange for oil sales, not the dollar. You can't do that, Saddam. So, but what's happening is because of that dominance of the dollar, it's allowed the United States to engage in many, many kind of irresponsible spending policies that other nations could never dream of. Wars that cost $6 trillion over the past 14 years in the Middle East, for example, to give you one example. So other nations are not happy with the continually printing off of more and more dollars, devaluing their holdings and so forth, like Russia, like China. So what we're seeing right now is that Russia and China have recently made an energy deal where they're trading their energy with each other, trading goods, not using the dollar. Dollar's going away for them. There is the potential in those nations of a gold-backed currency. And by the way, one thing that I was reading Putin is doing, Putin is like the chess champion of the global geopolitical system. Smart man. He's selling his oil in dollars, which is artificially high right now, the dollar. And he's selling his dollars and getting gold. He's hoarding gold. Smart move. Yeah, the ruble's hurting for a little while, but I think in the long run, he's going to be in a very, very good position. This is going to hurt the American economy, I think, in the long run. So what the U.S., White House, and Wall Street, because they're always like this, right, are seeing is we've got to stop this. This must be prevented. So we're going to do that, and we're also, let's try to control all that vast riches in Ukraine and Russia while we're doing it. So we're going to create regime change in Moscow, as they did last February in Ukraine with, yes, of course, a CIA-orchestrated coup of the Ukrainian government running Yanukovych out of the country. He was elected. Yes, he's a criminal. They're all criminals, but they ran him out of the country after his election, and they put in other criminals that are EU-friendly and IMF-friendly. That's how it goes. All right? Europe, yes, it's true. Everyone knows this. No one talks about it. And I look at the situation and I marvel at the U.S. press coverage of it. I just can't. And British, too. They're just as bad. So the thing is, the real world, like ordinary people, are kind of afraid of what is going on here, this aggressive posture that the United States has. McCain wants a war with Russia. It's insane. Fortunately, most people in this country are not on board with that. The Europeans are a little bit nervous, too. They're thinking, Russia might be really in a good position in a few years. We don't want to alienate them. So therefore, the plan, you bring Ukraine into the EU and NATO is what the U.S. wants to do. They wanted to arm Crimea against Russia. That's the bridge too far. That was never going to happen. They're going to bleed those nations, bleed Ukraine physically, bleed it financially, which they are doing. They want to keep this war going for as long as possible via proxy to destroy Putin. I think this is the goal at this point. They want to destroy his political foundation and crush the ruble at the same time, paving the way for Russian regime change. That's what I think they're doing. It's kind of an evil scheme when you really think about it, except the one thing that, when you look at it from a point of self-interest, it's all about preserving the petrodollar. They're going to do this for as long as possible through military means. The dollar is declining in its use as a global currency. I think I'm going off of memory here, but whereas a few decades ago it was 90-something% of all international currency energy purchases, now it's something in the 60s. So it's still significant, but not as much. If the dollar were not to be used primarily, you'd have nations dumping their dollar. If they dump the dollar, it's not a good thing for us here in this country. So as I say here, the U.S. attempt may be headed for an epic fail. And I'm not a doomsayer normally. I'm usually a pretty optimistic person, despite all this information that we have here. But I do have fears about 2015, and I'm just hoping it won't be a very bad year. So now there's 3 disclosure scenarios in the context of those types of things that I've just put out there. Here's disclosure scenario number 1. I call it premature disclosure. And as you can see from the pictures, premature disclosure may not be a fun situation. We have a situation in which it's possible that this U.S. gambit that's being played right now fails. And let's say we have a hyperinflation. Let's say it collapses the economy. Let's say it ends America's run as a global hegemonic power, a superpower. Still having the world's scariest, most powerful military-industrial complex, that's not a good situation for global stability. When a nation goes bankrupt and they've got all these weapons that they're itching to use. What does that mean? Potential for a U.S.-initiated global catastrophe? Yes, certainly. Premature disclosure. Now, what do I mean by that? Every certain number of years, this is something that was told to me by a prominent gentleman. One day I'll give all these names up. Can't right now, but he said to me, look, this comes up in high-level circles every 5, 7 years or so. Do we disclose the reality of this phenomenon? So according to him, this is an issue that percolates. Is there a plan for disclosure? Probably. The reason he said that they haven't had it up till now is that it's just a nightmare. He was on a subcommittee, he said to me, dealing with the legal implications of disclosure, despite the fact that he's a scientist, not a lawyer. And he said, we concluded that even that alone, the legal ramifications, lawsuits alone would be daunting. So there may be a plan, but I think it's a long-range plan. But here's one thing that I've learned in my study of some of the other nations when we get UFO data out of them, like in Soviet Union when it collapsed in 1991, 92, or like when in China when Mao died after 1976, or in Spain after Franco died. There are moments when you have a major regime change when information leaks out relating to this phenomenon. It doesn't happen every single time, but I think it has to happen in the right nation, a nation that's got a powerful military system in place, a nation that's got the ability to obtain data on UFOs. People jump ship, right? And sometimes that information leaks out. We had a lot of that with Russia. We even had a little bit of that in the U.S. after Watergate. We didn't have regime change, but we had enough of a shakeup that resulted in an improved freedom of information, that resulted in a great deal of UFO data coming to us. So when you have political crises, my theory is that this is an opportunity for premature disclosures about this to come out. And that could happen here. It's also possible that the catastrophes that result from a collapse of the U.S. economy would cause diversions from disclosure. But if we did have a premature disclosure, or if other things came out instead of UFO disclosure, it could be kind of like a runaway effect. So there could be discussions about 9/11 or JFK even looking into the truth about JFK's assassination, I still believe to this day would be explosive, especially when you consider that the CIA probably killed him. So when you have that type of situation, yes, it's a great deal of potential for political I realize some of you out there thinking, oh, he's gone off the deep end. I wanted to hear about UFOs. Well, my take on UFOs is it's always been within a political context, so you have to understand that about me. There's a lot of secrets in this world, and if one big one comes out, it could very easily trigger a lot of these others. And think about this. This is an incredible thing. When you take 10 steps back from our perspective here and you realize just how intense the web of lies is that envelops us every single day through what I like to call our official media, our official truth. To call it fictitious doesn't do it justice. It's an intense, 24/7 pervasive system of lies that really is designed to control us totally and completely. It's not just UFOs. It's everything. You just list it. You list some of these things, and it's just, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. Yeah. It just shocks me. I mean, I can't wrap my brain around it sometimes. It's just so amazing. So what about other nations in all of this? I think a lot of you have heard this statement. This is Dmitry Medvedev from just a little over 2 years ago. He's prime minister of Russia. He's a close associate of Putin. If you haven't heard it, I'm going to be brief with this. Medvedev gave an interview. After the interview, he's just talking sort of informally with some Russian journalists. And the topic of UFOs came up. And that's him talking. You can see his face is very serious. And he was totally serious and straight-faced through this. He says, along with the briefcase with nuclear codes, the president of the country is given a special top-secret folder. This folder in its entirety contains information about aliens who visited our planet. Along with this, you are given a report of the absolutely secret special service that exercises control over aliens on the territory of our country. And you go, say what? And then he continues. Now this is where the Western media had a field day with it. He says, more detailed information on this topic you can get from a well-known movie, Men in Black. I will not tell you how many of them are among us because it may cause panic. Right, well-known movie called Men in Black. The actual statement was you can receive more detailed information having watched the documentary film Men in Black, which is a Russian documentary film, not the American Hollywood Men in Black. Totally different. The Russian documentary is a very serious treatment of this. You can find it on YouTube. That, presumably, clearly is what he would have been referring to. The journalist he's talking to was almost laughing when she was interviewing him, but that you find is a very common reaction. People really do laugh. I think sometimes it's even involuntary. I'm thinking any journalist who knows, her profession is not going to laugh at the prime minister of the country when he's talking like that. He was totally straight-faced. People ask me and ask other researchers, was he being sincere? I don't know. I've never spoken with Dmitry Medvedev, but my sense is that this was a moment where he, for whatever reason, decided to let his guard down. I don't see that as impossible in the least. So the question is, would other nations, is that a possibility? Is there a disclosure card in the works by Russia, or maybe by China, or other powerful nations if the stuff hits the fan in the United States? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen. One reason is, look at Russia's situation. They're as dependent on oil as America, maybe more so. They rely on oil and natural gas for all of their significant national revenues. And anyone who looks a little bit into the UFO phenomenon realizes whatever these objects use to propel themselves, it's not petroleum. So, as I like to say, implicit within the solution of the UFO mystery is a post-petroleum world. It won't take very long. Disclosure comes out, people are going to be wondering, well, what's the source of energy of these things? And even if we don't pry that secret out of the black budget, guarantee you scientists are going to figure it out. Once they know that there's a solution there, they'll find it. It won't take long. So it's a revolutionary prospect, clearly. And I just can't see the motivation coming from Russia anymore from the United States, or from China for that matter, or any of these other nations. I think it's a little bit too disruptive. So the oil question alone, I think, is probably enough to promote a great deal of cooperation internationally among nations on this secret. Another reason, and I was hinting at this before about some of the other nations, not necessarily Russia, but other U.S. allies, why they're not disclosing it, is surveillance. You know, NSA is everywhere, everywhere. I think we understand this better now than we've ever done before. And then the fear of the repercussions of a post-disclosure world probably might be potentially worse in America than some other countries, but might be worse. What about Saudi Arabia? I mean, there's a place that could really go crazy, or much of the Middle East, or some of these other nations. You could really see a lot of mayhem happening. And then the fact is, I think most nations probably don't have the specific knowledge that would allow them truly to disclose anyway. I think we're talking about a handful of the most powerful nations that really have the goods on this matter. Anyway, that's premature disclosure. And I think it would probably be, if it happens, it'd be messy. I guess what I didn't mention in premature disclosure is the whole jumping ship phenomenon, some top insider leaking out the information and putting it out there. Not simply another nation, but an insider within the U.S. probably would be the most likely way that it would happen prematurely if we have a kind of a collapse. Preferred disclosure is the scenario number 2. This is, I think, how they want to do it. I want to lay this out, and looks like I've got 17 minutes. I think I can do this. As I see it right now in our world, we're in a race. It's a great race. People versus I guess our rulers, the elite, our handlers. Problem number 1, the greater social awareness sparked by the web. I mean, we're all in the last 20 plus years in a completely different world of intense communication with each other. We're learning from each other. We've got WikiLeaks, we've got Snowden, we've got all of these other ways that we're learning secrets that our masters don't really want us to know. What's the solution? For them, control the web. Greater and greater control, censorship, spying on you through your web browser and everything else. We all understand that. That's one solution. Another problem, the threat of sharing breakthrough ideas and technology. Next generation of, say, the Pirate Bay. Right now, everyone talks about sharing movies as like the great crime of the century. Well, I mean, right? Oh my God, you downloaded Master and Commander. What the hell's wrong with you? Wow, bad person, evil. Okay, I don't really think that's, Hollywood has an interest in maintaining their rights, but I think the real concern looking forward is sharing of technology through file sharing, next generation of Pirate Bay. Think of it 3D printing, which is one of the things I love to talk about. So 10, 20 years from now, 3D printers are going to be incredibly sophisticated. They're already going way faster than we expected. So I like to theorize about some smart person in some part of the world coming up with a free energy device. There's a lot of brilliant people working on this right now. I'll bet not all of them are bogus. So, or they call them energy harvesting devices. This is just one example. Some smart person in some other part of the world comes up with it, and they upload, because they're just a nice person, a free version that you could download and print on your 3D printer that in the future will be able to print electronic circuit boards and the like. Right? Yeah, right. So you go off the grid. Yeah, I think yay indeed. So I think this is not really a preferred solution for the power elite. I don't think they want that. They don't want you to share your breakthrough ideas and technology. So their solution, control the web, again, and control international law. And I was talking earlier about the TPPA and the like. One of the big things that leaked out about that through WikiLeaks is that thing, all of which is being done covertly. Thanks for transparency, President Obama, is all designed, the part that we know, to prevent this type of activity from happening. It's all about protecting intellectual copyright, which, we understand that, but this is to such an extreme and would prevent any kind of sharing of technology like this. So internationally, not just within nations. Another problem, we have a restive population due to basically the intentional emasculation of a national economy. It's been going on for years. So, solution to that, create a police state. So, that's what they want to do. There's another great race. Oh, by the way, the reason it's a race is because the people, on the one hand, are working toward getting important leaks out to basically break or transform the system, but the people controlling the system are trying to clamp everything down before that happens. That's the race. Okay? The other great race, though, is what I would call between, let's say, the breakaway civilization and the others, whatever they are. Think about some possibilities here. One possibility is that we are vassals or hostages to some extent. Totally possible. There's these other beings here. They've got great great technology, great power, much more than we have. The military's, let's say, unhappy, stressed out about the situation. So possibilities that our leadership is working for them to some extent, just like, America has dictators working for them, working for their corporations as, economic hitmen against them. Maybe there are interstellar economic hitmen working on us, and they've co-opted our leaders. Is it impossible? Of course it's not impossible. Could easily be the case. Another possibility is that our leaders are actually working against these others to retain independence for humanity. Wouldn't that be a noble thing? Maybe that's the case. Kind of doubt it, but you never know. I'm sure there are people within that power structure who might feel that way, though. I have to think so. In any case, as I say here, there's probably an attempt to play catch-up to a large extent. In other words, and I mentioned this before, from a military point of view, if nothing else, you see this presence of these others who've got incredible weapons, incredible technology anyway. And that's always a potential threat. So you have to catch up. To do that, though, I think they seem to have decided that means you have to create a hierarchical state, an authoritarian state, maybe a totalitarian state. And it is under those conditions only that there will be a voluntary disclosure of sorts. So therefore, as I say, before any sort of disclosure, they want to enforce intellectual property rights. That means no free file sharing. I kind of talked about that. They want to create a total police state, total surveillance, intimidation through your computer, through your street corners. They'll watch you, facial recognition. If you want to have a demonstration against the power, they're going to triangulate your eyes and your nose. They're going to know who you are. It's just the truth. No privacy anymore. That's intimidation, and that's a destruction of your liberty and your freedom. They want to turn the web into TV. This is an actual image from, Samsung, I think? Yeah, Samsung. This is typical. This is what they're trying to do to the web. They want to integrate all of your entertainment with the web. So you have your Netflix and your USA Today. Don't forget USA Today. Pandora and History Channel, Wall Street Journal. It's all a corporate kind of channeling of your internet experience. Increasingly, we're going to see this, and Netflix and the like. So it's basically guided. They want to guide your internet experience to the maximum extent possible and commercialize it. So all of this. And then, of course, this is key, absolutely key. We are in an era of false flags. False flags, I argue, have become, at least in the minds of people running their various nations, an accepted form of statecraft. All right, what is a false flag? Simply put, government's doing something really nasty and blaming it on another party, like, terrorists, let's say. All right, I've been looking into this personally. Lately, I'm finding it fascinating. There's a lot of them out there, and in fact, what I would say is we're in an era of almost, yearly is not enough, continuous creation of false flags. It's actually easier to do. Certain nations in the world have incredibly sophisticated capabilities of doing this. I may talk about this more on another occasion, but it is a continuous thing, and the reason is to corral the population into accepting certain measures. Because if you're creating a new global system, right, you have to get the people on board to at least the maximum extent possible. So these events increasingly are created in order to scare the hell out of you and make you say, save me from the evil people, surveil me, protect me. Really, this is what it's all about. And again, I'll be having more to say about this in the future, but this is an important part of our world. There have been false flags throughout the 20th century. Many of you, I'm sure, are very apt students of the phenomenon as well. But I think we can say that the phenomenon has picked up and it's whereas in the past it was at a nice little walking pace, a little trot, now it's racing. It's like a sprinter and it's just not stopping. All of this is a goal to maintain total control over global intellectual life. That's what I would argue. A kind of corporate domination of the world, creating a kind of intellectual mindset in which you are basically owned intellectually by them. At the same time, there would be an eventual public reveal of breakaway technology under those kinds of controlled conditions. That's an actual image done by a woman that I know who I would say has probably become like a sister to me. She saw this object in 2003 over Kingston, Ontario, over her car. Extremely conscientious person. I've looked into this case. Anyway, under the then disclosure, in other words, the preferred disclosure, I've come to believe now, will be achieved within a 24/7, all-encompassing virtual fascist society. So when you're under total control, then, and only then, I believe, will they want to disclose their version of the reality when they feel confident that you're not really going to be questioning them to any significant extent. So we're getting, wow, I'm actually timing this pretty well, I'm glad. What's the ultimate goal that our human elite has vis-a-vis the others? I would like to look ahead into the world. If we can try, to imagine our future 50 years ahead. It's hard to do, just when you think about how fast we're racing ahead, right? But here's a couple of things to just put out there for you. Advanced artificial intelligence, like really advanced artificial intelligence. There's artificial intelligence that can defeat the world's greatest grandmaster in chess. That's a very specific kind of artificial intelligence. Then you have AI people talking about artificial general intelligence. That's our type of intelligence. That progress is being made very rapidly. And the current estimate is that another 10 years or so, maybe 15, your computer will have human level of intelligence. Like you'll be able to talk to your computer presumably, and it'll be like a person, except it'll have a processing power that's way faster than ours, and it won't need sleep or coffee in the morning. So, and then once it achieves that, the idea is that it will then rapidly achieve what's called super intelligence, artificial, so like beyond genius level, presumably, because it would be able then to foresee its own upgrading needs very rapidly, and it wouldn't need you for its own enhancements and so forth. So it would quickly go way up there. So that's one part of the future. Another part is quantum computing, which I think many of us have heard of, may exist at the NSA's Utah facility, totally possible. And if it doesn't exist there, it's going to exist soon. Quantum computing is to our computing what our computing is to the Gutenberg printing press, or just about close. It's a completely taking computing beyond the next level. I can't even really fully understand it. Then we'll have complete DNA control, total mastery of the human genome and beyond, to artificially create and enhance people, obviously, is what is a logical thing they're going to try to do. Maybe fix the telomeres so that you don't age, so some people can have super longevity. I say some people, because I don't think they're going to give it to everyone. I mean, you got to be able to afford this stuff, and I really doubt that those people who've got power are really interested in all of us being able to live for 500 years or more. Just doubt it. DNA enhancements for other kinds of capabilities, maybe super strength, super intelligence, who knows. And then implants, which exist right now. I've just had a very interesting conversation with someone recently about this within the military. All kinds of fascinating implants, ocular implants, implants inside your bone structure in your mouth to allow you to communicate without anyone knowing to other people far, far away. Being able to see through other creatures. This is it was shown to me, a 1999 article, having implants within the eyes of a cat. And back then, this is 16 years ago, being able to see through the cat's eyes. This is real technology. So just imagine what they can do right now and what we'll be able to do in the future for those people who can't afford it, including organic 3D printing. What I foresee, yeah, that's right, organic 3D printing. So not just replacement organs in the future, replacement heart, replacement liver, 3D printed, but hey, why not, 3D print a being? With all of the AI and quantum and total control, is it really going to be impossible to have that? I mean, it's just unbelievable. All of this could be within 50 years. What I call a class-based transhumanism. Again, as you can see, class-based. So you can have Hitler's master race actually coming into being for real. People who can live virtually, centuries, super intelligence, super strength. They would look at the rest of us as subhuman. And presumably you'd have a whole group of humans with IQs of 80 who would do whatever menial tasks, and you give them their next version of Dancing with the Whatevers and their football, and, look, really, we're already moving to that anyway, even without this, but it's going to happen. So it's a utopia for those who can afford it. That's scenario number 2. All right, not an ideal future. And then there's this scenario number 3, and this will be, I'll be wrapping up here. People-driven disclosure. All right, this clearly is my preferred method. And we have a lot of work cut out for us. It's not going to be easy to do. All right, but there are things that we can do right now. We can support truth in every facet of our lives. Support groups that leak information, whether legally or illegally. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. WikiLeaks has done things that supposedly the U.S. and Britain consider illegal. Well, the hell with them. This is important information for the world, and they need our support. Yes. All right? Support. Thank you. Support good UFO research. Hey, support me. I could use the money. Not really. No, it's okay. But support researchers and organizations, open minds. MUFON. As long as all these organizations are working with the white hats on, not the dark hats, right? Use your own critical thinking. Don't just copy and paste the latest Facebook rumor that comes your way. Please do not do that. In my newest book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, one little section of it actually is designed to help all of us become better armchair researchers so you don't get hosed by the next hoax. Okay? Actually, you could read it. It'll teach you a few things. So, use critical thinking. But also, you got to be brave. Be brave at the same time. Opt out when feasible. What does that mean? Well, I homeschooled my kids for many years. I was proud of that fact. I cultivated two very independent thinkers in my household. One of them's a little too independent, but hey, that's life. Be independent in the best way that you can be. For my part, I made my own decision not to work in the corporate world. I'm not saying that you have to do that. We all have to make our decisions, but we can all make certain decisions to be independent of this enveloping system. Support a free web, engage in focused and pragmatic citizen action, inspire other people. Again, be brave. It's probably the most important thing you can be. Have integrity and be brave. And yes, we have to encourage ourselves. When you're with a group of your friends, don't be afraid. Life is too short. Life is too short. So if someone disagrees with you, big deal. People disagree with me all the time. I don't care anymore. All right? And let's keep our heads looking to the future. There's always new tools on the way to help us. I created, this is one slide I created years ago, and I'm not really, I have a slightly different feeling about it. What I would like to see, one reason that I wrote AD, was to provide a positive roadmap for some future president, let's say, who would disclose this reality. And basically the point is to say that it doesn't have to be fascism, man. It can be freedom. To the maximum extent possible. The idea of a U.S. president reclaiming full constitutional authority in the name of the people, in other words, not as a dictator, but tearing power away from the black budget breakaway civilization, which has gone totally beyond our Constitution. And then looking at a way to create a global structure that's not dominated by corporations, that's not dominated by David Rockefeller and his people and the Rothschilds and the banks. Now, how do you do that? Other than breaking out the guillotines and cutting off heads? I don't know. I mean, this is a very difficult situation to deal with. But somehow we need a way, a system that will, and I think disclosure actually has one potential to do this because the repercussions would be so immense. And I know I'm out of time. I'm going to try to wrap this up very quickly. That it could allow us the one golden opportunity to open up the black budget world and just rip it out by the root. If a disclosure doesn't do it, nothing's going to do it. It has to be disclosure. There's no other way. There's no other way. It's got to be done. Kill the dominance of corporate tyrannical power. Promote democratic, publicly owned, publicly shared systems based on freedom, not based on control. Okay, I'm not talking about evil socialism. I'm talking about freedom. All right, but freedom not just from government domination, but from corporate domination. Both are very important. And then much more. I don't know if all of what I'm saying here is realistic, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, maybe this sounds just as utopian as the people who were talking about ascension a couple of years ago. But I do think it's possible if we're willing to do the work. All right, this is something that will take generations, not just a couple of years, generations and maybe lifetimes. It's a messy political process. Final thoughts. I probably will be about 3 minutes over here. I apologize. Who or what exactly are we dealing with? We've got these other beings here. I haven't hardly talked about them. Often I don't. Sometimes I do. Are there grays? Yes, I believe there are grays. Are there human-like beings who have intense telepathy, who interact with us? Yes, I absolutely believe that. I've talked about it many times. I think what we have here are a group of others who have been here a long, long time. And only in the 20th century onward have some of our elite become aware of them. And we're now at this interim stage where a small group of people are officially aware and the great masses are still kind of kept in the dark on this. That will not last forever. That cannot last forever. All right? These entities and all of the research we've done have very powerful telepathy, very powerful mind-to-mind communication. They are presumably having superintelligence, but also an alien intelligence. That is, that intelligence is not like our own. I could talk for a long time about this. Unfortunately, I can't. Some of them have a humanoid appearance. Some of them may be grays. Some of them may be reptoids, perhaps. Some of them maybe they're benign. Maybe they are. In any case, the revelation, the open revelation of having such a presence here, you can just imagine how revolutionary, how profound, how dramatic, and maybe to many how ominous that could be. How hopeful to some people it might be. I don't know. This is something that is absolutely, utterly transformable. So much to make us ask, are we actually ready for open contact? And to which I have always said, no, we are certainly not ready for open contact, but it's irrelevant. Whether or not we're ready is irrelevant. All right? Were you ready for your first child? No. Did you have your first child? Yes, you did. Okay? People, we do these things. So it's going to happen. I vision it like we're on a train that's moving on a high-speed track, and there's really not a whole lot that's going to stop it. Even if disclosure doesn't happen in the next decade, next century? Yes, yeah, of course within a century. So at one point between now and then will it happen? That I don't know. None of us knows. But I think we're on that path, and it's going to be a very, very wild ride. This is my latest book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. It is my favorite book. It actually is. It's my attempt to do a summation of the entire UFO phenomenon for a sophisticated reader, but it's an overview, and it's... even my experienced readers have said to me that they love it, but if you've never read a UFO book before, I think it's actually the perfect book. It's why I wrote it. Anyway, I'll be at my table for the rest of the day. I want to thank you very much for your time. Thank you.